next to this. What a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus. You didn't want heaven without us, so Jesus, you brought heaven down.
All right. All right, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you got an opportunity to grab a bite, grab a restroom, meet some people, talk to our vendors. Our next break will be lunchtime, so if you didn't, you can do that then. But I am really, really excited to welcome the next group, not even group of panelists, but the next group that we have coming to us. They are from Urban Promise here in Charlotte, and they are gonna be talking, woo-woo. Are y'all Urban Promisers? Yes? Yeah, okay, all right. They are gonna be talking to us about educational equity. And so we are excited to have them. And I think what's so special about this presentation is we have a mix of adults and students. And so we need to constantly be reminding ourselves that students are not the church of tomorrow, they are the church of today. And so it is great when they are here with us and we get the wisdom of the elders and the strength of the youth, and it works together to form a beautiful picture. So I'm really excited about this, if you all cannot tell. So without further ado, I'm gonna quickly introduce them. First, coming to us is, say it one more time, Ciara Riddle. Ciara Riddle discovered her passion for youth leadership as she studied community development and served as with an after-school program in South Africa. She has, before coming to Urban Promise Charlotte, she was a 7th grade teacher in Clinton, North Carolina, for 2 years as a Teach for America Corps member. Can we welcome Ciara? Did I get it right? Okay. Next, we have Rolanda Sue, who is a Charlotte resident and graduate of Johnson C. Smith University. And she has a double degree in biology and chemistry. My God, okay. Biology and chemistry, has taught high school science for 5 years before transitioning to Urban Promise. Can we welcome Rolanda? Linda Ka is a high school senior at Cato Middle College, where she is dual enrolled in rigorous high school and college courses. She is a street leader captain with Urban Promise. Can we welcome Linda? Imari Walker was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is a high school senior at Northwest School of the Arts. He enjoys dancing and acting and is a street leader with Urban Promise. Can we welcome Imari? And Miss Linda Hernandez Angel. Linda is a high school senior at South Meck High School. And, oh, no South Meckers? Okay, I see how y'all do. All right, South Meck, and she enjoys spending time with her family. Linda has been with Urban Promise for 7 years, first as a camper, now as a street leader. Can we welcome Linda? All right. Without further ado, you all have the platform. Thank you.
All right. How are we? How was our break? Okay, exciting, maybe not, I don't know. But awesome, thank you so much for that eloquent introduction. Super excited to stand here representing Urban Promise. It is a program near and dear to all of our hearts. It is the work that we do every single day to care for our community. Today we're going to explore just a little bit more about the inequities in education, specifically in Charlotte, our home. But when I spoke to our students, we asked them, what is something that you want the audience to take away when they leave? And they said they want the audience to be aware, inspired, connected. And I think that's powerful. And so really quickly, we just came from a break. So I want you to sit in your chair. and just really feel how your body is oriented right now. Feel the chair beneath you, feel your feet, feel your hands. Take that internally. How is your mind right now? What are you thinking of? Are you a little bit hungry? Are you a little bit anxious? Are you carrying some thoughts from whatever was happening before you got here? And like, how are you spiritually right now? Because this topic can be pretty heavy. And so we want to make sure that we are oriented in this space and present, and just caring well for the work that we're doing right now, because part of bringing awareness and inspiration and connection is to bring healing. And so just to be present really quickly, so everybody just take a deep breath. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Rolanda Sue is going to start us off with a spoken word.
Morning, guys. So I'm going to open us up with a spoken word that's kind of going to set up this time for us today, talking about education equity. Education should be free. And you're probably scratching your head like, girl, sis, public education is free. But you are farthest from right, because Black and brown students pay the highest price. And that's with the balance and success of their lives. Education should be free. But when schools in poverty-stricken areas catalyze the system to continuously oppress students that look like me, that's true robbery. When students arrive at buildings that should scream of community but instead emulate prisons with cinder block walls, dull hallways, strapped officers, and brawny BMTs, that sounds like secondhand trauma to me. School become prisons, and young Black boys prisoners punished for small infractions, which leads to aggressive suspensions, which leads to being kicked out, left for dead to be eaten up by the streets, only to be picked up in real shackles and locked down in real prisons, and worst case scenarios, not even given the chance to breathe. Education should be free, but Black and brown students pay the highest price. School zoning creating segregation of neighborhoods, leaving high poverty students in what the city sees as the hood. With property taxes that are too low, thus no funding for resources, no science labs for students to explore, not enough money to pay teachers, so students yet again suffer from underpaid and overworked teachers that can't offer more than structured curriculum because they too are in survival mode. Education should be free, but Black and brown students pay the highest price. They fear the community that should create safety and despise their teachers because their teachers stifle creativity and murder their spirits, clinging to phrases like, girl, you ain't ever gonna be nothing. Faces screaming through Zoom screens, yelling at students for their inability to learn and lead, thus creating more disengagement with education and the purpose of learning. When if they ask their teachers for help, they won't even take the time to slow down and actually teach. Make it make sense, please. Education should be free, but Black and brown students pay the highest price. They try to chain brown tongues, forcing them to learn English, calling it a second language, forcing students to choose between cultures, reducing them to no identity because they lack a social 9 digits that don't even provide security. They shackle their neighbors at the border, connecting every force to break them, cage their kids, no remorse, no bottle for their tears, then expect students to show up and learn. In these circumstances, education should be free. And guess what? It is. Just not for kids that look like me. Just across community lines, students get to learn in buildings that are colorful and fun. They get to explore not just in labs, but across state and international lines. They get access to the best resources and the best teachers because money just ain't scarce. They even get to be seen for who they are, for who they could become. And when they get praise, no one says it's in spite of. Education should be free. And in the hood, we just want equity.
Thank you. Oh, struggling a little bit. Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Ro. Here is the thing. Cool. So moving forward, I just want everybody to, again, take breaths as you need to. Be aware of how your body's feeling when you hear some of the statistics that we are going to share. Because like I said, and probably how you're feeling after that poem, it is heavy. So the reality of Charlotte is that, and some of you may be familiar with this term, but that there is a tale of two cities, right? And some of you may have heard the emphasis of the wedge and the crescent. And we have a wedge of wealth where students, the reality is students there are thriving and have a very different educational experience than students who are located in communities in the crescent. And so that's kind of what we're going to be sharing about and why we have brought students from Urban Promise and from CMS to share more of their personal stories. So education equity. It means that all students, regardless of race, regardless of class, regardless of location, circumstances, have equal access to opportunities to succeed in the classroom and outside of the classroom. But the reality is that is not what is going on in Charlotte. So what is actually happening in Charlotte? Well, white students in low poverty schools, they have access to top-rated teachers. They are graduating ready for college, while Hispanic and Black students are honestly falling behind, typically due to things like high teacher turnover rates, limited resources, and lower quality college preparation programs. Honestly, and I was a middle school teacher prior to working with Urban Promise, and I saw my students coming into middle school already behind in basic reading and writing, which is essential for them moving forward in high school and eventually in college. As a street leader director at Urban Promise, meaning I work specifically with our high school students, I see firsthand students continue to fall behind because teachers, unfortunately, in CMS do not have the capacity to bridge these gaps that are already being seen before middle school, already being seen, honestly, in as early as third grade, as early as kindergarten. Because there are extenuating circumstances, honestly, beyond just the walls of school, but that are going on in the community. And so we want to share more about that today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rolanda to share specifically about some of the elements that we're going to explore with our students.
Yes, similar to what Cece just shared with us, educational equity in Charlotte is so important. And as you see behind me, these are some of the topics that we're going to try to tackle today. Now, this is the tip of the iceberg. Talking about school segregation by race and income. So similar to what I mentioned in my spoken word, like the rezoning of Charlotte intentionally separates communities of color from other communities. The achievement gap. So in these communities, if students don't have teachers that are prepared, that are present, that can just show up outside of survival mode, then they aren't apt to actually teach students or even bridge the gap between student learning. Access to great teachers, access to advanced classes, higher suspension rates in Black and brown communities, and the puzzle of chronic absenteeism, right? So I think when we think of students coming to school, we may see them just as, oh, they're showing up and taking up this seat. But outside of school, so many of our kids that are in low socioeconomic communities face other challenges, right? They're going home to parents that may not be present in the home because they're working overtime to make ends meet, or they're going home to violent homes. And sometimes schools, which are supposed to provide safe spaces for them, don't allow them to be just kids. School segregation. So we see oftentimes that low poverty schools are mostly comprised of white students. And in contrast to that, high poverty schools, our majority, are comprised of black and brown students. And that again goes back to that rezoning or zoning of communities. According to CMS, I'm just gonna hit you with a stat real quick, at least 90% of our student bodies were black and brown students, made up 25% of our student schools. So when we're going into schools, specifically in the area that I lead in West Charlotte, Philippa Berry, West Charlotte, Harding, those schools are predominantly African American and Hispanic population, with at least 85% of their students on free or reduced lunch. And then it's hard to bridge an achievement gap. You guys know we've been currently in COVID for about 7-8 months now. So what used to be just like the summer slide, like our students would face in the summer, has now been extended to the COVID slide. We'll talk a little bit more about what school has looked like since we've transitioned into a new season at Urban Promise, but we're seeing that students hadn't logged into school since March, or some students hadn't logged in when they got to Urban Promise at all, and school had been in session for at least a month. So this achievement gap is really hard to bridge, especially in black and brown communities when parents don't have resources to send their kids to get tutoring, to get extra help, to bridge the gap. And if our kids aren't reading on 3rd grade level, of course by 3rd grade, that now feeds into that school to prison pipeline. So not just the building looking like prisons, but now they're actively creating prison cells based on if our kids can read on 3rd grade level or not. Similarly, 65% of our students from high poverty schools were mostly black, just didn't graduate on time. If you can't read, that doesn't just affect you in reading class, it affects you in all classes. You need to read math problems, you need to read in science. So it's a constant struggle, and if students can't read, they can't learn, and then it leads to other behavioral issues that we often see.
All right. Well, furthering the achievement gap are things like access to great teachers, which I mentioned earlier. So about 40% of students in low poverty schools were taught by a top-rated teacher, compared to 27% in high poverty schools. Black and Hispanic students in high poverty schools are the most likely to be taught by first-year teachers, and that was my experience through Teach for America, where I was a first-year teacher who honestly felt overwhelmed by the task in front of me. I was at a Title I school and had students who, like I mentioned before, were falling behind, and I didn't have the resources to support them well, to care for them well. I didn't have the training that I wish I would have had looking back to best care for students with high needs, or best cater to learning differences and challenges that might not be happening or are not happening in low poverty schools. Access to advanced classes is another thing that continues to widen that achievement gap. The reality is that students from high poverty schools are not entering college preparation classes at the same rate of students in low poverty schools, and that even for the students that do enter into AP classes from high poverty schools, they are not passing at the rate of students in low poverty schools. And we have, and like I said earlier, I work with high school students, and I see a lot of my students get funneled through AP classes and are not being given the quality education that they deserve because of stereotypes, because of just bias, where they're being seen as not as intellectual or not given the time and the care that they need. There's not an equal investment here, is the reality. And I have seen students time and time again reach out, but not necessarily, and it's not at the fault necessarily of individual teachers, but the system isn't created to give the teachers the resources they need to give that quality education, even in these advanced classes. Suspension rates. It starts with, I mentioned before, bias. It starts with racist policies. It starts with lack of education. Black students are far more likely to be suspended, especially in high poverty, middle and high schools, than Hispanic or white students. We see racial bias informing a teacher's inability to be patient or see a student as being valued enough to have a conversation rather than being immediately kicked out of class. We see a misunderstanding of cultural, just like navigating the space as a Black and brown student in a predominantly white space where they don't see teachers who represent them. And so what is just simply tapping or drumming to help them focus now turns into a disruptive distraction, and a teacher isn't recognizing that student beyond that moment and then kicks them out of the class. And so I have seen when I was a teacher, students, and I would be sitting in my classroom and a principal would come in and see that I let a student keep their do-rag on, or I let a student wear slides in class, and because that doesn't sit with the standard, that's disruptive, and that student is pulled out and put in ISS or in-school suspension for something as simple as being who they are. And so we see this disparity here, and I want to also take note of chronic absenteeism, something that sometimes goes a little bit unnoticed, but this is detrimental to a student's ability to achieve. So in elementary school, attendance is consistently high regardless of poverty or race, but middle and high school, students of color in high poverty schools are far more likely to be chronically absent. And a lot of this is due to family dynamics. For high poverty students or people in high poverty, they're in survival mode. And they prioritize things that are going on in the present. And so things like school, where there might not be an immediate return, they're focused on, okay, well, I need to keep my student here at home because there are things going on at home that I need them for. I have students who will tell me, look, I have to miss class because my mom needs me to take care of my siblings. My mom needs me present for the things that are going on at home that are more immediate. And so you have students missing school, which obviously leads to them not being able to bridge that gap and keep moving forward. And so as we move forward, we want to share a little bit more about our work at Urban Promise and what we are doing to kind of support our students amidst all of these elements that we just named. And so I'm going to turn it over back to Ro to share a little bit more about our mission and vision at Urban Promise.
Right. So Urban Promise's mission is to provide Charlotte's children and youth with the spiritual, academic, social development necessary to really become Christian leaders of tomorrow, right? And in short, our vision is to reach a child, raise a leader, and restore a community. We're going to go through kind of what that looks like. Thanks. Cool. To reach a child. So our hope is that we get connected and partnered with our neighboring schools. So for in West Charlotte, Camp Freedom, our neighboring school is Ashley Park Elementary. And our hope is that we reach that child in kindergarten. So if we can get them in kindergarten, we're able to provide literacy support for them, free after-school and summer programming, help parents to get engaged with their learning and participation, not just in after school, but at school. Help support them in academic instruction because we hire reading teachers from their schools to kind of help bridge that reading gap we talked about earlier, and also like provide character and spiritual growth for them. So if we can grab them early, we can provide additional support and actually work in partnership with schools and parents so that our students aren't kind of falling into these gaps that we talked about earlier. On average, we have reading throughout the year and during the summer, and on average, our students actually improve their reading abilities by 3.5 to like 4 months of reading, just in our 6-week summer program where students won't necessarily pick up books if they're not at UP, or won't have parents that will take them to the library to have play dates with friends, or even just check out books. If we grab them early, in elementary school, then we can help raise that leader, which then turns into, hopefully, our street leaders, which you see. Cece's going to talk about street leaders, right?
All right, so as I mentioned before, I'm a street leader director. So with Urban Promise, we have a program where we employ our high school students to mentor and care for our elementary and middle school students. And so we offer that year-round employment through summer programming and after-school programming during the school year. We've transitioned to adjust to the needs of COVID as well this year and continue to operate in person. With their commitment to leading our students, our high school street leaders are also provided with training, leadership development. On Fridays, we meet with them to provide college development and college advising, as well as SAT prep. And then we want to work on expanding their network of support, and so a lot of our students are involved in counseling as well as mentoring. And this is just essential because we want to raise our leaders up, and that needs to look holistically in order to then see that trickle effect of influence and mentoring down to our younger students in middle and elementary school. Something very exciting about our programming is that we've been able to, year after year, see our students graduate out of our program and go on to college. So 100% of our first 6 senior street leader classes have graduated high school on time and have received college acceptance. Most will be the first in their families to graduate from college. So it's really exciting. Rolanda and I have had the blessing to walk for over 4 years with our street leaders here on stage who are now seniors and taking that step forward towards college and will be the first in their families. So thank you for celebrating them. But that pours into the next step, which is restore community. We want to see our students graduate out of our program and return to Charlotte after college to become leaders. And so Rolanda's going to share a little bit more again about that.
Yes, the last part of our vision is to restore community. And that's the part where we haven't, well, now we're getting to see that because the first class of our Urban Promise Street Leaders have now graduated from college. And restoring communities looks like our students graduating from college and then coming back to this very community that rooted them, that grounded them, that poured into them, that gave them support, and actually providing those same opportunities for other street leaders, for other kids in the schools that they went to. Some we've seen in just this season, they've became Urban Promise mentors to other street leaders that are still in the program. They've worked closely with us in our Urban Promise Academy where they're serving as classroom facilitators, helping kids on a day-to-day basis, making sure they're logging into school, making sure they're getting schoolwork done. They come back and become business leaders. Some have returned and actually become teachers and taught at Moving School on Freedom Drive. And they're committed to bringing their resources, their knowledge, their talent, everything that we've taught them and that they've gone out and learned in their different new college communities and bringing that back to the community at hand. Some of them are still in school, trying to become nonprofit leaders, education leaders, and really just leaders committed to this community. One in particular that I can think of is Izzy, who graduated from Davidson and now has returned to Charlotte. Part of Urban Promise, he is a mentor to one of our street leaders, and he works now for C4, which is Christ-Centered Community Counseling, which he was a part of while he was a street leader. So kind of seeing that full vision, full circle has really just been super exciting, to say the least. But also I think seeing that vision play out and seeing that legacy of community restoration and community compassion is something that we're just looking forward to seeing in the years to come. So 86% of our street leader alumni have graduated college or are still enrolled, which is in contrast to about 34% of low-income students actually get there and finish on time. Some of the challenges that they face as low-income students is even before they get to college, that summer, about 46% of students don't actually make it to the first step, right? So although those students may graduate from high school, if they don't have the right people in their lives, the right mentors, the resources or the connections or the network to actually get them scholarships, to make sure that their financial aid is squared away, to make sure that they can actually get on campus, they're not gonna actually make it. So I think in bridging that gap, even for our graduating seniors, has just been rewarding to see that our students can make it to college, can survive college, still getting a connection and having a connection to Urban Promise. Because CC provides also mentor and alumni support, while they're in school, just creates a continuum community of support and compassion. Click the next.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hear from our street leaders here. And so there was already an introduction, but just really quickly, again, we have Linda Ka, Amari Walker, and Linda Hernandez Angel. And so we're excited to bring them on. So just a quick, another round of applause for them.
Hear me? There we go. Sound different on this mic. So, like Cece says, we've brought our street leaders because by no means we are the experts in education. They are every day in schools, not just in CMS, but they get to explore college campuses and they get to experience firsthand experiences with teachers, with administrators, with counselors, and we just wanted them to come share about their experiences as students, colored students in our Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. So at the beginning, we talked about different pain points in our school systems that attack the learning of our students. And one of those is the school-to-prison pipeline. So who gets suspended? You're probably thinking that, oh man, suspension rates are equal regardless of who the student is. But a student, we read in Bettina Love's book that African-American females automatically would get higher suspension rates because teachers presumed that they had attitudes with them, right? So we have Amari here who's gonna share a little bit about his experience in the school systems, kind of seeing like where his friends like fall into this gap as well as him. And then we wanted to just hint onto the punitive versus restorative justice. So Cece mentioned this earlier, but students of color, instead of actually trying to access the root of why students are misbehaving or have behavioral issues, it's automatic like, nah, you're gone, you're out of here. So Imari, as a black man in a CMS school, can I hear you?
Yes.
Okay, cool. How have you seen punitive discipline in action at school growing up?
Okay. So I've definitely seen punitive discipline more in other students than myself because I was always the kid that played it safe. I was not going for anything. I didn't want no parts of trouble. But I think that overall, it's a very dismissive way of discipline. And it just leaves the child believing that they're not cared for or like they're just they don't want to be vulnerable.
So in contrast to that, I know you'd mentioned some of this really directly affected friends of yours. Can you explain a little bit about how you've seen that play out?
Yeah. So growing up, there was always this like group of kids who, not even through the students, but through teachers as well, who would get like passed on throughout grades and just already have this reputation that like they're bad kids. And I feel like most of that came from just communication and kids really not knowing how to speak on like what they're going through, so they kind of act it out. And most teachers just like go straight to the punitive discipline. And these kids just get passed along through the system. And these are people who I grew up with. So like seeing them now and like where they are, it's very disappointing because it's like the system failed you, the community failed you.
And then in contrast, at Urban Promise, we spend a great deal of time teaching not to be punitive and really being transformative and restorative. So Imari, can you explain a bit about your role as a street leader and how you have contrasted like what you are present in every day and like what that looks like differently for our kids at Urban Promise?
Yeah. So me being a street leader, I've definitely tried to battle the whole punitive discipline thing because I know the firsthand fear that comes with your name being called and just like, excuse me, and like wondering, am I in trouble? Like, is my mom gonna get called? Like, yeah, I really just always try to make it very clear to my students that like, you're not in trouble. I know this isn't how you are and we're gonna get to the bottom of it simply just with a conversation. I know there's this one student who I had, and he was just having a rough day, and you can tell, not even only through like their actions, but just like body language and all that. So I asked him, I was like, do you want to step out? And he was so defensive, and it was really just saddening because like it shouldn't be like that. But he started crying and fussing and just telling me he didn't want to go, and I'm just like, you're not in trouble, I just want to talk. And we ended up talking, and I got down to the root of it, and basically somebody in his family had passed away. So even in that, it's like, imagine if I had just like, you acting up, you're going sent straight to Rolanda. That probably wouldn't have done anything for him.
Thanks, Imari.
So we're next going to ask all three of them to share about this concept called spirit murdering, coined by, or I'm not sure actually it was coined by, but definitely shared by Bettina Love in her book. And so legal scholar Patricia Williams coined the term to argue that racism is more than just physical pain. Racism robs people of color of their humanity and their dignity and leaves personal, psychological, and spiritual injuries. Racism is traumatic because it is a loss of protection, safety, nurturance, and acceptance, which of course is all things children need to enter school and learn. So the spirit murdering of Black and brown children leaves a trail of unanswered questions. How do children learn after being physically assaulted or racially insulted by a person who is supposed to protect them, love them, and teach them? How does a Black or brown children or Black and brown child live, learn, and grow when her spirit or his spirit is under attack at school and her or his body is in danger inside the classroom? How does a parent grapple with this reality? How are children's imaginations and humanity stunted by the notion that they are never safe in the schools because of the color of their skin or the God they pray to? Where does the soul go to heal when school is a place of trauma? And so moving forward, we're going to hear from each of them their own experience with spirit murdering, either personally or witnessing that in school. So we'll start with Linda Ka.
Hi. Oh, you guys can hear me. Okay. So personally, I think I've experienced spirit murdering more by my peers than my teachers, actually. Just growing up, I remember just like facing stereotypes and like racial slurs about who I am and who they see me as rather than who I was made to be and who I want to be. And I just remember growing up, and it was about in 3rd grade, we had this grade tracker where we would track all our unit tests, and I got 3 consecutive 100s, all about my hard work, of course. But my peers were telling me, well, it's unfair because she's Asian. And I asked them, what does Asian have to do with my grades and my progress and my academics? And it was like, well, that's how you're naturally born. You're naturally smart. And I feel like a lot of that really messed with how I valued my own intellectual worth and who I was as a person. It pressured me, really. I remember I was still going to ESL at the time, and whenever my ESL coordinator would come get me, I would tell her, please just wait outside the classroom. I don't want them to see that I'm going to ESL. And I think that she understood. She was really nice about it. But thinking back on it, I really regret like hiding who I was and who I am, and just hiding the fact that I struggled too. But I didn't want them to understand that like, because of what they perpetuated on me, on like always being smart and always being perfect, that I had to do so. And then even outside of the classroom, I remember bringing my own like breakfast and lunch, and students just telling me and asking me, what are you eating? That looks weird, that smells weird. And I just stopped bringing my own breakfast and lunch, and then cafeteria food and CMS is already not adequate, I would say. And just some days I would just go days with, not days, but like just periods just without eating because I was afraid of like bringing my own culture and bringing my own self to school. And I think that really like transgressed into who I am today. And I feel like I try to embrace my culture as much as I have today because I feel like I lost a lot of it and I scrapped a lot of it growing up. And I feel like I was really spiritually murdered by those who I've grown up with. And I hope that like we really progress as like a generation into who we are and how we teach our kids about how this dark term of spirit murdering doesn't have to exist anymore.
I've definitely experienced it more from on the teacher side, and it really all comes from just a place of not wanting to really be vulnerable, because, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, me just playing it safe and like not really wanting any type of trouble, and just being fearful of like anything that would come from it, like good, bad, all types of days that I had. Like, I never really wanted to stand out. And I feel like that's kind of trickled in like today, because, well, before Urban Promise, I really struggled with being vulnerable. And that trickled into my relationship with my parents, with my siblings, and I kind of almost isolated myself away, all from just being on edge as a third grader, like second, third grade. And I really just believe that had I been exposed to more open arms, then maybe like I could have been a little better off.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, for me, I feel like I experienced it. I feel like I experienced that spirit murder every day since kindergarten. You know, walking in with my mom, you automatically see a Hispanic mom with her daughter. So I was based off that one story, oh, you come from an immigrant parent. So I was already, you know, my confidence once I heard that was like, you know, gone. You know, every day, and even till this day, through virtual learning, I still get these like one story thing of being a Hispanic, you know, in a classroom. Kind of just, you know, feel like growing up, I was already set in that mindset of I'm not gonna make it out, you know, I'm already set to failure. So I struggle with that every day, even by my classmates. And I feel like what Linda said, you know, when I even take my own lunch, we hear a lot of students just be like, what are you eating? What is that? Just making negative comments about it. Or when I try to, you know, I feel like when I used to talk in Spanish or even ESL, like I would even still get bullied, you know, by teachers, by students. And day to day, just going back to school, not feeling motivated, not feeling like, you know, pumped up, like, hey, I'm going to school, I'm excited. I would just be like, I don't want to go. I wasn't motivated to learn. I wasn't motivated to, you know, pay attention, because my whole life was basically, you're Hispanic, you won't make it, you're a failure. So yeah, it's just really hard, you know, and sometimes even seeing that with some of our campers, some of our students, it's just upsetting because it hits home, you know, like you've been through it. I mean, for me, it's been, 12 years about it that I've been through it. So it's hard, you know, day to day. So, yeah.
And really quickly, how have either one of you can share, how have you kind of taken the charge to go against that while you're at Urban Promise, like making sure through your authentic relationships that students don't feel that way in your care?
I definitely, like, because one thing that I always feared growing up was crying, going back to being vulnerable, like being a black male, a male period. Like, crying is almost deemed weak for some people. So for a lot of my students, I'm always just reassuring them, like, your feelings are valid. How you feel is valid. I will never tell you, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. That's one thing.
For me, I feel like spirit murdering really leads to like this slow, antagonizing like death for our kids and like their culture and their pride and like their well-being. And I feel like at Urban Promise, we really try to defeat that by like really just sitting down and having a conversation with them. We don't go through like the systematic ways of like discipline, and we really try to like have a conversation with them, figure out what's going on, ask them how they are. We try to help them heal and like a space of compassion and love where they can like grow and learn where they're comfortable and where they can like freely ask questions without feeling like burdened by like being bullied by their classmates or like being shamed by their teachers that they don't understand, they're not paying attention. I feel like we really are able to give them the individualized help that they need to really be who they are and be authentic.
So for the sake of time, we won't be able to cover the achievement gap, but I definitely want to encourage you on the break, find them, talk to them, hear their stories. And the same thing, we're all in the midst of a pandemic right now, and we have seen the realities of how that achievement gap has been exacerbated by students struggling with remote learning. And so I encourage you to hear their voices, ask them questions, and engage with them. But to close us, we do want to share just why, very quickly and in short words, why it matters to us and why we hope it matters to you. So I'm going to turn it really quickly back to them.
Okay, educational equity. I feel like every time I hear that word, I kind of get a little bit excited because I feel like that's always been something I've been really passionate about. I've been involved in like multiple clubs and like multiple organizations regarding what educational equity is and how important it is. But I feel like it really gets down as you look into the kids who are growing up today, or as I look into mirrors. And I realize that as humans, we lack good mirrors. We lack the ability to see our potential when everything else is like blurred. Our mirrors are like broken and shattered and just like smudged with all these labels simultaneously slapped upon us that we are these statistics. And I feel like educational equity, it matters because that's how we're gonna get the equal opportunity that all of us can receive as people of color. And I feel like we really need to understand that educational equity cannot be glazed over anymore, any further, because educational equity lies in opportunity, and opportunity is what we need for our students and for ourselves to progress who we are as society and who we are as children of God. So.
Okay, Linda, period.
I definitely think it goes back to like just the definition of equity, and like because we all want equality. See, we all want equality, and I feel like you can't have equality without equity. Equity. And I think that it starts with the community, and that as a community, we got to come together with our mask and just do the things that are needed. It's like fundraising, getting together, conferences, anything helps.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with both of you guys, but I mean, it's important because it's hard for students, you know, to be just put a label, put a story automatically, and, you know, grow up with that almost your entire life. I feel like it's important to give those students that opportunity, you know, to prove themselves who they are, to prove themselves that they are capable of, you know, any other student, especially people of color, because automatically we're just kind of put a big stop sign. You know, when you put a label on us, it's like, you're done, basically. So it's just important to give us the opportunity to show who we are, to prove that we can make it out, you know, because a lot of us, that's what we want to do. Most of us are first-generation students who are going to go to college, and I'm very appreciative that I'm, you know, here. I'm giving so many opportunities, and I'm, you know, taking advantage of it. And I want others to experience that too. I want our younger students to experience that, you know, because it's hard. My brother, apparently, he didn't, unfortunately, sorry, he didn't have the opportunity. And it's sad to see that, you know, he's living, you know, just like a normal person, that he fell in that hole, you know, in that label, that story. And I'm just trying to prove that wrong, you know? Other students are trying to prove that wrong. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I'll keep mine simple because I know we're pressed on time. But educational equity is important to me. Similar to a lot of our students, I myself was an immigrant that migrated to the United States that had my own share of spirit martyrdom because my accent was too deep. I didn't fit in. I didn't belong. So I just was silent in school. I just got good grades, did what I did, kept my head down, and keep it moving, right? So I think understanding now that having equitable spaces for students to learn, to grow, to develop, to be creative, to be innovative, like helps that kid show up as their whole self. Like they don't have to turn off any part of them while being a student. And I think equitable education would allow that and will allow our kids to actually show up as who they are and who God made them to be.
So as we close, I want you to really think about why does it matter to you? Educational equity matters to me because, well, it should matter to everyone because Black and brown students, Black and brown lives matter. And school is a mirror of society. And so unfortunately, the school system was not originally created with Black and brown lives, or the care of Black and brown lives in mind. It wasn't created for their success. And so moving forward, education should be a powerful tool, a tool that liberates, a tool that empowers, a tool that inspires and strengthens, but that's just not the reality. And so as we move forward, I want you to think about why does it matter to you, and we want to leave you with just what can you do, and it's simple. Whatever you can do. What is in your locus of control that you can take responsibility for? And so just a few out here, well, a few. But I think key pieces here starts with just doing your own work, your own internal work, your own individual work, reading, learning about, and it's been said already, the history of Charlotte, what's going on, examining your own self. Advocate for all of these elements here, equity, anti-racist curriculum, CMS representing in leadership there, voting for candidates who are going to help lessen this burden, investing financially, and then volunteering, supporting other programs like Urban Promise, supporting CMS, and other nonprofit organizations that are doing this work, or churches that are doing this work, and continuing to show up as you are today. So we thank you so very much for showing up today and being present, and we're excited to connect with you guys. Feel free to reach out to us for more information. But again, thank you. Round of applause for them. Yeah. And a round of applause for you. You're here.